The missing string that broke him came home and rebuilt him. The G string snapped on a Wednesday. That's what I remember first. Not the sound of it, though it cracked loud enough to make the dog lift her head from the floor, but the way the broken end curled back and caught the lamplight before it fell. Thin and gold and useless. I set the fiddle on the table and didn't pick it up again for 11 months. People will tell you a man doesn't fall apart over a fiddle string, and they're right, it wasn't the string. My name is Clarence Rook. I spent 31 years working cattle on the Hadley spread outside Cimarron, and for 29 of those years I played fiddle at every dance, every gathering, every wedding that happened within 20 miles of that ranch. Didn't matter the season. Didn't matter if my hands were stiff from cold or my back was singing from a week of fence work. Come Saturday night, somebody would clear a barn floor and I'd tune up and play until the lanterns burned low, and the last couple had finally gone home satisfied. I wasn't the best fiddler in the territory. Harlan Byatt over near Rayado was better by some measure, cleaner technique, steadier on the high notes, but I had something Harlan didn't, which was that I played like the music mattered, like it was the last song before the world ended, and I wanted to say everything I could before the quiet took back over. People felt that. They came out to dance, but they stayed for whatever it was I was putting into those strings. The fiddle had belonged to my father and his mother before him, which meant it was old in a way that showed. The spruce top had darkened to the color of strong tea. There was a crack along the lower bout, long-heeled with hide glue, that my father said happened when a mule sat on the case during a river crossing sometime before the war. I believed him. The instrument had a voice that new ones don't, something open and raw in the low register, something that ached a little even on happy tunes. Married a woman named Delia Foss in 1871. She was a school teacher out of Colorado, and she came into Cimarron the summer I turned 32. And I made a fool of myself the first time I saw her standing in the post office, reading a letter with one finger pressed to her lip. Married her that December. We had 15 years together that were good in the way hard years with a good person are good, not easy, but real. She died of fever in the spring of '86, and I buried her on the hill behind the house, where she could see the mesa she always said reminded her of a sleeping bear. Our daughter Nora was 9 when Delia passed. I raised her the best I could, which was not well. A man who works cattle 12 hours a day and then disappears into his music at night is not a man paying close attention to his child. I knew it even then. I knew it the way you know a fence is leaning. You see it every day, you mean to fix it, and one morning it's on the ground. Nora left when she was 17. She and I had a fight about something I can't even reconstruct now. The particulars are gone, but the feeling of it is still there, that cold hard weight of two people who love each other saying the worst things they know how to say. She rode out with the Mercer family, who were relocating to Kansas, and for 3 years I got no word. Then a letter, then another, then a long quiet that I took for finality and didn't argue with because I didn't know how. She married a man named Holt Carver. They settled in Springer, which was close enough that it felt like a deliberate choice of distance. I heard she had a son. Then I heard the boy died young, and I wrote her a letter that sat on my table for 2 weeks before I burned it because nothing I'd written in it was adequate. I was 63 when the G-string snapped. I'd been out to the Hadley Ranch for what turned out to be the last time. My knees had gone bad that winter, and Hadley had taken on a younger hand to do the riding I couldn't manage anymore. He kept me on for odd work, but we both knew what it meant. I rode home that evening, made coffee, sat down with the fiddle out of habit, and the string broke before I'd played a single note. I set it down and I didn't pick it up. It sounds small even as I say it. A man puts down an instrument and doesn't pick it back up, so what? But the fiddle had been the thing I brought everything to. Every hard day, every year without Delia, every year without Nora, I'd carried it all to those strings and let the music hold it for me. Without the music, I had no place to put any of it. It all just stayed inside me and went bad the way anything goes bad that's got nowhere to go. I stopped going to town much. I let the vegetable patch go to thistle. My neighbor Prout stopped by in September to check on me, and I could see by his face when I opened the door that I'd gotten bad enough to show. I told him I was fine, and he nodded slowly in the way that means a man doesn't believe you, but respects you enough not to say so. October came. The cottonwoods went yellow and then bare. I started sleeping later and later, which I'd never done in my life. I'd been a before-dawn man since I was 15, but in the mornings there was nothing pulling me out of bed, and so the bed kept me. November. I ran low on coffee and didn't go to get more. The morning Nora came, I was sitting at the kitchen table in the gray light doing nothing particular. I heard the horse before I heard anything else, 2 horses, actually, moving at a walk up the track from the road. I didn't get up. I'd gotten to the point where standing up to see what was happening outside felt like more than I could be asked to do. The knock was firm. 3 knocks, evenly spaced, like a person who decided before they knocked that they were knocking and wasn't going to second-guess it. I opened the door. She was 30 years old and she looked like her mother around the eyes, which I wasn't ready for. She had her mother's way of holding still, that quality of being entirely present, no part of her somewhere else. A tall man stood behind her with his hat in his hands, his face patient and neutral. Nora looked at me and then passed me into the house, taking stock, and something moved through her expression that she didn't let become anything. "You look terrible," she said. "I know," I said. "We're coming in." They came in. Her husband Holt shook my hand and then quietly went outside to see to the horses and didn't come back for a while, which told me he was a man of some intelligence. Nora moved through the kitchen without asking permission, picking things up, setting things down, making sense of what was there and what wasn't. She found the empty coffee tin. She said nothing about it. She built a fire and put water on. She said, "How long has it been like this?" I said, "What?" She said, "However long it's been, it's done now." That was all. She didn't make a speech. She didn't list the things that were wrong or tell me what she thought I should have done differently or ask me to explain myself. She just said it was done and turned back to the stove like the matter was settled. I sat down at the table because my legs weren't quite right. We ate that evening from supplies she'd brought in her saddlebags. Holt turned out to be a quiet man who expressed opinions about horses and weather and very little else, which suited me fine. He ate and listened and didn't try to fill silences. After supper, he went outside to check on the animals and Nora, and I sat by the fire, and I looked at the fiddle on the table. She said, "The string." I said, "Yeah." She said, "You got more?" I said, "Not here." "Then we'll get some, like that, simple as water." She picked the fiddle up carefully, the way someone handles a thing they know matters, turned it over once, set it back down, didn't play it or pretend she could, just looked at it the way you'd look at something that had been through a lot. "Mama used to say you played like you were trying to get something out," she said, "like you were trying to drain something off." I didn't know Delia had said that. I told Nora so. She said a lot of things I don't think she always said to you. We sat with that for a while. They stayed a week that first visit. Nora had the vegetable patch cleared and turned before I'd fully registered what she was doing. She rode into Cimarron and came back with coffee and flour, and a coil of new G-strings from old Petrie at the hardware store, who apparently kept a supply for reasons having to do with his own guitar that I'd never known about in 30 years. The morning she put the new string on, she sat at the table with the fiddle and did it slowly and deliberately, the way she did everything, her hands steady, tightening the peg until the pitch was close, and then tuning it up the last bit by ear, which surprised me. She handed it to me when she was done. I held it for a minute. Then I played a scale, just a scale up and back. The new G string sounded bright and a little tight, the way new strings do. Nora watched me. She didn't smile or say anything encouraging. She just watched, like she was witnessing something that was supposed to be witnessed. I played a second scale. Then I found the opening of an old reel I'd been playing since I was 12 years old, a simple thing in D, and I played it through once slowly, and then again not slowly. And by the time I'd gone through it a third time, something in my chest had shifted, not broken open, nothing that dramatic, just moved slightly from where it had been lodged for 11 months. I stopped. Nora said, "There you are." 2 words. But the way she said it, not to flatter me, not to be kind, but because it was accurate, because she had come all this way to find me and had found me and wanted to say so plainly. Those 2 words did something that nothing else had done in a long time. I looked at her. She had her mother's eyes and her own face, and she'd gotten in the saddle and ridden down here because she'd decided to, because she'd weighed what we were to each other against everything else, and decided it was worth the trouble. I said, "I'm sorry it took so long to write you, after the boy." She said, "You wrote, I got it." I said, "I burned it." She said, "Then you wrote a second one and didn't send it either. I figured there was a stack of them." I said there was. She said, "I know." I don't know what she knew exactly, or how she knew it, but she was right. And somehow the fact that she'd known, that she'd factored it in and come anyway, made the whole long silence between us feel less like an ending and more like weather that had finally passed. They rode out on a Friday. She hugged me at the door, quick and firm, the way someone hugs when they're planning to come back. Holt shook my hand and said it had been a pleasure, and I believed him. She said, "We'll be back in 6 weeks, before Christmas." I said I'd have the place in better shape. She said, "I'll believe that when I see it," and she was already turning toward the horses. She came back in 6 weeks. She came back after that. She sent letters in between. I sent letters back, which I had never found easy and found less difficult now for reasons I couldn't quite explain. Something about having been seen in the bad state and found worth coming back to. It did something to the fear of being seen. By spring I was playing Saturday dances again. Not in Cimarron, which felt too familiar, but over in Rayado. Harlan Byatt had died the winter before, and they'd needed a fiddler, and someone had mentioned my name. I went out on a night in March when the road was still muddy from snowmelt, and the air had that particular cold sharpness that tells you winter isn't gone but is thinking about it. And I played for 4 hours straight and went home with my hands stiff, and my knees aching, and something in me full that had been empty for a long time. I am 67 now. My knees are no better and my back has opinions, but most Friday nights I sit by the fire with the fiddle, and on Saturdays I play. Nora and Holt come out every 6 weeks or so. She drinks coffee and argues with me about small things, the best route to Springer, the right amount of salt in beans, with an easy comfort that tells me we've gotten somewhere that used to seem a long way off. She doesn't treat me like a man who nearly went under. She treats me like her father, which is the better thing, and which took both of us longer to get to than it should have. One evening last fall she sat down across from me while I was tuning up and she said, "Play something Mama would have liked." So I did. I played the waltz I'd played at our wedding, the one Delia had specifically requested because she said it was the saddest happy song she'd ever heard. I played it slowly. Nora listened with her hands in her lap and her eyes on the fire, and when I finished she nodded once, the way her mother used to nod when something was true. The new G string has been on the fiddle for 3 years. It's broken in now, warm in the low register, closer to what the old one sounded like. I notice it every time I play, which is most days. I think about what would have happened if she hadn't knocked on that door. I think about it the way you think about a horse that nearly put you over a cliff, not with fear exactly, just with a clear recognition that things could have gone a different way, and that you're grateful they didn't, and that the gratitude belongs to something specific. Not luck, not time, not your own good sense. A woman who decided you were worth the ride.